Hi, I'm Donna Jordan from Jordan Fabrics. Today I'm going to be making a new pattern and it's called I Heart You. This is a pattern from Cozy Quilt Designs that calls for strips. It's one of their strip club patterns. But the pattern also gives you directions for yardage. So you can use quarter yard cuts. You can also use fat quarters, and that's what we're going to use today. We have lots of fat quarter bundles here, but I would really like to use this red pink one because these are all prints from Kaffe, and I think that would be just lovely in this pattern.
For the backgrounds, I'm going to look over here at the grunge fabrics from Moda. I enjoy working with these, and let's see, I want a nice contrast, and I'm going to pick a couple out here that I see, and I'm going to get them into a little bit of light, but I'm going to start here. I'm going to set my 4 choices down on the desk here in good light. I can see right now, Donna, that this is the one I'm drawn to because of the light background and these green tones, which pick up the greens and aqua blues in here.
Oh, it's perfect.
You like that?
I love it.
That should be outstanding.
All right, so let's take these down to the studio and get started. So the first thing we need to do is open up this package of fat quarters, see what they look like, and we will get them all ironed flat. Now, the pattern calls for 40 strips or 14 fat quarters. My bundle happens to have a few extra, so we will either work those extra ones in, or we may just pick out a couple that we eliminate. I've picked out the 14 fat quarters that I'm going to use, and we need to open these up and iron them nice and flat so that we can cut everything precisely. I have all of the fat quarters ironed nice and flat. I'm not going to cut them all at once because I can't cut 14 layers myself. So I've got 4 layers of fabric here. I'm going to line up on my cutting board. I'm going to use the weight to hold my plastic ruler, and I'm going to cut 2.5-inch strips. I have all of the fabrics cut into 2.5-inch strips. So now I'm going to follow Cozy's pattern and do the subcuts. Now this is a pattern we buy from them, so I can't give you all of the sizes, but they're really easy to follow. I have all of the subcutting done, so I'm going to gather up all of these pieces and take them over to the sewing machine, except for these long ones, which we're going to set aside for the pieced border. We'll do that at the very end. Each row of this quilt is some combination of background and colored squares. And the easiest way to make this is to pull off one row at a time. So I've got one row right here, and I'm just going to sew these in order. So I'm going to start with the bottom piece. I'm going to sew this right to it using 1/4-inch seam, and I'm going to press all of the seams either away from the center of the row or away from the light. So this one's going to be pressed away from the center. Just finger press it a little. Get your next piece here. Stitch it on. So just keep stitching till the row is done. Now that row is all done. So again, finger press all of these light seams away from the center. Right here, you want to finger press towards the dark. These ones, again, just to one side, it doesn't matter, but right here, towards the dark side. Now, some of the rows have different amounts of these printed fabrics, and you don't want to try to match them up. You just want to get a nice variety. We have a whole bunch of different prints here, so don't look when you put them in. Just pick out random ones and sew them together. So follow the pattern and then make all the rows you need so we can put the heart together. I have all the rows stitched together, and even though I finger pressed them, I really like to bring them to the ironing board and make sure they're flat and straight. Now, if you iron them now, it makes the next step more accurate and quicker. Now that I've got all the rows together, it's real easy to lay the quilt out. So this one row goes in the middle. Then we've got 2 matching rows, and they go on each side of that middle. So I'm putting one to the right, one to the left. And the farther out I go here, the more it's going to start looking like a heart. Of course, we're going to need to sew the rows together before we can really see that heart come out. Now that all the rows are laid out, I like to stand back and see if any fabrics are sticking out. In this particular quilt, the most prominent fabric to me is this dot, and there's quite a bit of it over in this half. The nice thing is this row and this row are exactly the same. So I'm going to take this out and move this over here. And then I'm going to set this guy here, and that balances it a little bit better. So I may do a little more swapping, and then I'm going to sew the rows together. To get the rows stitched together in the proper order, I'm going to stack them all up, and then we're going to clip them together. And this way I know I won't get out of order. Now I'm just going to take one of my little clamps here and clamp this a couple times, and then I know I can keep these in order. I like to put my clamped rows on my lap here, and I'm going to get the first 2 rows. So this is going to be at the top of the quilt. I'm going to put it up here, and I'm going to grab the next row and put it to the right of that one. And then I'm going to re-clamp these so that they stay together, and that way if they slide off my lap or I get interrupted, I know they're in order. This is the most fun part of making this quilt. These rows are exactly the same length, so I'm going to put them right sides together, but none of the seams line up, so I don't have to match any intersections at all. I just have to start at the top. You can put a pin or 2 in if you like, but the row is not really that long. So I am simply going to feed this down here, make sure these far ends meet, hold it in the middle, and go. I'm going to open this up and finger press the seam toward what is going to be the center of the quilt. So that's going to go this way. Once I get enough rows to where I'm in the center of the quilt, then I will press the other direction. So I'm basically going to be pressing towards the center of the quilt, and that is because most of the seam allowances will be going towards the dark side. That is all done, so let's go get this ironed up. It's already fairly flat because we were finger pressing, but I want to iron it nice and flat, so I'm going to smooth it out, and I can feel if those seams are going the way I want them to. And then I'm going to iron it with a dry iron first, and once we have a section nice and flat, then we will steam it. The heart was so much fun to make. It's so cheerful in these bright Kaffe facet fabrics. Now, if you're going to make the wall hanging size that's shown on the pattern here, you're only going to need 1 heart. Now, I want to make a big quilt, so I'm going to need 4 of the hearts. So I'm going to go ahead and get those stitched up. I have all 4 hearts done. They are so happy. These are just the happiest hearts. Now, this is how they're going to get laid out. We're going to have a little bit more background between them there. Then we've got this row up here. Oh, that's just going to look so nice. This way we'll be able to see every heart individually. So what we're going to do is cut a little bit of background, go around here, then we're going to work on this nice pieced border. Now we're going to want to make that pieced border. This one, we're going to take all these pieces. We're going to sew them into one really long piece at random. It doesn't matter what goes next to what. And then we are going to iron it up and stitch it all around the outside of the quilt. Okay, we've got the nice pieced border on there, and now we're going to go down to the store and pick out a nice outside border. I'm definitely going to be putting one of the Kaffe facet prints on the borders because they're so bold and they will frame this so nicely. So we've got all these nice bright colors here, and I'm going to pull a couple out, see what looks good. So I always like to audition the fabrics. So I'm going to put the quilt here where I can see the borders. Then I'm just going to hold these up. That would work. One-way design, a little bit tough. This one is just awesome, and I think I could cut the borders this way and I'd get a lot of fun stuff showing. That would be good. This one, a little bit too orange for me. I think we'll go with this one and we'll cut the borders long. Now the pattern calls for 2 yards of fabric to cut your borders. And generally, border pieces are cut this way. But this particular fabric will look a lot better if we cut long borders this way. It's still going to use the same amount of yardage. I'm just going to cut my borders the other direction so we will get all of this showing all the way around the quilt. Now that the borders are all on and the quilt is loaded, I've picked out a quilting pattern. Now this has hearts and little swirls. I think that will look really good on this quilt. It's not too busy, but it'll have a lot of quilting. For thread colors, any of these threads would work really well, but I think this will be the best option because it's not going to show in the dark and it's also not going to show in the light. So that's the color we're going to go with. Now that the quilt is finished, you can really see those big hearts. From back there, they're just big and bold, and in the Kaffe facet prints, it makes such a statement. So some people worry about cutting those Kaffe facet big scale prints into small pieces, but just look at how nice it turns out, even though we're cutting them into relatively small pieces. Now I used the fat quarter bundle. So this had 20 fat quarters. And remember, we only needed 14 for the quilt. The 14 did all this patchwork and the border. We had 6 left over, but look where I used them. They're on a pieced binding here. Used up the whole bundle. It was absolutely wonderful. Now the background, we cut this from yardage. You can also use a jelly roll for the background. So if you have neutral jelly roll strips, this could all be pieced also. I happen to like a more solid background with these bold Kaffe facet prints, and look how nice the heart quilting shows. The thread doesn't show much, but the texture of it shows those nice hearts. Now if you imagine this in other colors, blues or greens, this would make a great wedding gift. So you could find out what color the bride and groom like and make them a lovely wedding quilt. Thanks for watching our tutorial today on how to make the I Heart You quilt. Now we're having another giveaway. We're going to give away this Building Blocks Christmas quilt. It's very easy to enter the contest. Just subscribe to our YouTube channel and then follow the link below that says giveaway. And remember, this is open to everyone worldwide. We're also giving away a quilt on Instagram. So if you're an Instagram user, head over there and check it out. Good luck and happy quilting.